Welcome back. About an hour left to record for tonight as we move on now to the examination of the number 6. I'm not sure myself what happened to the number 5 and why Philo is jumping straight to the number 6. He went over 4, but I don't ever recall him going over the number 5, so don't ask me. I'm only reading it as it's written here. Maybe he'll come back to 5, but at any rate, he's going to move on and he's going to discuss the number 6 as we continue from where we left off. And in the last video, by the way, he was discussing the calculation of the number 4, and he used the simple game of nuts with children placing 3 nuts on the ground and then one on top of it, creating a pyramid. And he talked about how it was the perfect cube. Anyway, if you want more on that, you can look back to the previous video. Going to continue now as Philo begins to examine the number 6. If we examine the number 6, which is composed of 2 threes, if these two numbers are multiplied, it is not the number 6 that is produced, but a different one, the number 9. And the number 4 has many other powers also, which we must subsequently show more accurately in a separate essay appropriated to it. At present, it is sufficient to add this, that it was the foundation of the creation of the whole heaven and the whole world. For the 4 elements out of which this universe was made flowed from the number 4 as from a fountain. And in addition to the 4 elements, the seasons of the year are also 4, which are the causes of the generation of animals and plants, the year being divided into the quadruple division of winter and spring and summer and autumn. The aforesaid number, therefore, being accounted worthy of such preeminence in nature, the Creator of necessity adorned the heaven by the number 4, namely by that most beautiful and most godlike ornament, the light-giving stars. And knowing that of all existing things, light is the most excellent, he made it the instrument of the best of all the senses, sight. For what the mind is in the soul, that the eye is in the body. For each of them sees, the one beholding those existing things which are perceptible only to the intellect, and the other those which are perceptible to the external senses. But the mind is in need of knowledge in order to distinguish incorporeal things, and the eyes have need of light in order to be able to perceive bodies. And light is also the cause of many other good things to men, and particularly of the greatest, namely philosophy. For the sight being sent upwards by light, and beholding the nature of the stars and their harmonious movement, and the well-ordered revolutions of the fixed stars and of the planets, some always revolving in the same manner and coming to the same places, and others having double periods in an anomalous and somewhat contrary manner, beholding also the harmonious dances of all these bodies arranged according to the laws of perfect music, causes an ineffable joy and delight to the soul. And the soul, feasting on a continuous series of spectacles, for one succeeds another, has an insatiable love for beholding such. Then, as is usually the case, it examines with increased curiosity what is the substance of these things which are visible, and whether they have an existence without having been created, or whether they receive their origin by creation, and what is the character of their movement, and what the causes are by which everything is regulated. And it is from inquiries into these things that philosophy has boy, I cannot speak. And it is from inquiries into these things that philosophy has arisen, than which no more perfect good has entered into human life. But the Creator, having a regard to that idea of light perceptible only by the intellect, which has been spoken of in the mention made of the incorporeal world, created those stars which are perceptible by the external senses, those divine and superlatively beautiful images, which on many accounts he placed in the purest temple of corporeal substance, namely, in heaven. One of the reasons for his so doing was that they might give light. Another was that they might be signs. Another had reference to their dividing the times of the seasons of the year, and above all, dividing days and nights, of months and years, which are the measures of time, and which have given rise to the nature of number. And how great is the use, and how great the advantage derivable from each of the aforesaid things, is plain from their effect. But with a view to a more accurate comprehension of them, it may perhaps not be out of place to trace out the truth in a regular discussion. Now the whole of time being divided into two portions, day and night, the sovereignty of the day the Father has assigned to the Son, as a mighty monarch, and that of the night he has given to the moon and to the multitude of the other stars. And the greatness of the power and sovereignty of the Son has its most conspicuous proof in what has been already said. For he, being one and single, has been allotted for his own share, and by himself 1/2 portion of all time, namely, day. And all the other lights in conjunction with the moon have the other portion, which is called night. And when the sun rises, all the appearances of such numbers of stars are not only obscured, but absolutely disappear from the effusion of his beams. And when he sets, then they all assembled together begin to display their own peculiar brilliancy and their separate qualities. And they have been created, as Moses tells us, not only that they might send light upon the earth, but also that they might display signs of future events. For either by their risings, or their settings, or their eclipses, or again by their appearances and occultations, or by other variations observable in their motions, men oftentimes conjecture what is about to happen, the productiveness or unproductiveness of the crops, the birth or loss of their cattle, fine weather or cloudy weather, calm and violent storms of wind, floods in the rivers or droughts, a tranquil state of the sea and heavy waves, unusual changes in the seasons of the year, when either the summer is cold like winter, or the winter warm, or when the spring assumes the temperature of autumn, or the autumn that of spring. And before now, some men have conjecturally predicted disturbances and commotions of the earth from the revolutions of the heavenly bodies, and innumerable other events which have turned out most exactly true. So that it is a most veracious saying that the stars were created to act as signs, and moreover to mark the seasons. And by the word seasons, the divisions of the year are here intended. And why may not this be reasonably affirmed? For what other idea of opportunity can there be except that it is the time for success? And the seasons bring everything to perfection and set everything right, giving perfection to the sowing and planting of fruits, and to the birth and growth of animals. They were also created to serve as measure of time, for it is by the appointed periodical revolutions of the sun and moon and other stars that days and months and years are determined. And moreover, it is owing to them that the most useful of all things, the nature of number, exists, time having displayed it. For from 1 day comes the limit, and from 2 the number 2, and from 3 3, and from the notion of a month is derived the number 30, and from a year that number which is equal to the days of the 12 months, and from infinite time comes the notion of infinite number. To such great and indispensable advantages do the natures of the heavenly bodies and the motions of the stars tend. And to how many other things might I also affirm that they contribute, which are as yet unknown to us? For all things are not known to the will of man, but of the things which contribute towards the durability of the universe, those which are established by laws and ordinances which God has appointed to be unalterable forever, are accomplished in every instance and in every country. Then, when earth and heaven had been adorned with their befitting ornaments, one with a triad, and the other, as has been already said, with a quaternion, God proceeded to create the races of mortal creatures, making the beginning with the aquatic animals on the fifth day, thinking that there was no one thing so akin to another as the number five as to animals. For animate things differ from inanimate in nothing more than in sensation, and sensation is divided according to a five-fold division into sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Accordingly, the Creator allotted to each of the senses its appropriate matter, and also its peculiar faculty of judgment, by which it should decide on what came before it. So sight judges of colors, and hearing of sounds, and taste of juices, and smell of vapors, and touch of softness and hardness, and of heat and cold, and of smoothness and roughness. Therefore he commanded all the races of fish and sea monsters to stand together in their places, animals differing both in their sizes and in their qualities, for they vary in different seas, though in some cases they are the same. And every animal was not formed to live everywhere. And was not this reasonable? For some of them delight in marshy places, and in water which is very deep, and some in sewers and harbors, being neither able to crawl up upon the land, nor to swim off far from the land. Some, again, dwell in the middle and in the deep sea, and avoid all the projecting promontories and islands and rocks. Some also exult in fine weather and in calm, and some in storms and heavy surf. For being exercised by continual buffetings, and being in the habit of withstanding the current by force, they are very vigorous and become stout. After that he created the races of birds as akin to the races of aquatic animals, for they are each of them swimmers, leaving no species of creatures which traverse the air unfinished. So now, when the air and the water had received their appropriate races of animals, as an allotment that was their due, God again summoned the earth for the creation of that share which still remained, and after the production of plants, the terrestrial animals still remained. And God said, Let the earth bring forth cattle and beasts and creeping things of each kind. And the earth did as it was commanded, and immediately sent forth animals differing in their formation and in their strength, and in the injurious or beneficial powers that were implanted in them. And after all he made man. But how he made him I will mention presently, after I have first explained that he adopted the most beautiful connection and train of consequences according to the system of the creation of animals which he had sketched out to himself. For of souls the most sluggish and the most weakly formed has been allotted to the race of fishes, and the most exquisitely endowed soul, that which is in all respects most excellent, has been given to the race of mankind, and one something between the two to the races of terrestrial animals and those which traverse the air. For the soul of such creatures is endowed with more acute sensations than the soul of fishes, but is more dull than that of mankind. And it was on this account that of all living creatures God created fishes first, inasmuch as they partake of corporeal substance in a greater degree than they partake of soul, being in a manner animals and not animals, moving, soulless things, having a sort of semblance of soul diffused through them for no object beyond that of keeping their bodies alive, just as they say that salt preserves meat, in order that they may not easily be destroyed. And after the fishes he created winged and terrestrial animals, for these are endowed with a higher degree of sensation, and from their formation show that the properties of their animating principle are of a higher order. But after all the rest, then, as has been said before, he created man, to whom he gave that admirable endowment of mind, the soul, if I may so call it, of the soul, as being like the pupil to the eye. For those who most accurately investigate the natures of things affirm that it is the pupil which is the eye of the eye. So at last all things were created and existing together. But when they all were collected in one place, then some sort of order was necessarily laid down for them, for the sake of the production of them from one another, which was hereafter to take place. Now in things which exist in part, the principle of order is this: to begin with that which is most inferior in its nature, and to end with that which is the most excellent of all. And what that is, we will explain. It has been arranged that seed should be the principle of the generation of animals. It is plainly seen that this is a thing of no importance, being like foam. But when it has descended into the womb and remained there, then immediately it receives motion and is changed into nature. And nature is more excellent than seed, as also motion is better than quiet in created things. And nature, like a workman, or, to speak more correctly, like a faultless art, endows the moist substance with life, and fashions it, distributing it among the limbs and parts of the body, allotting that portion which can produce breath and nourishment, and sensation to the powers of the soul. For as to the reasoning powers, we may pass over them for the present, on account of those who say that the mind enters into the body from without, being something divine and eternal. Nature, therefore, began from an insignificant seed, and ended in the most honorable of things, namely, in the formation of animals and men. And the very same thing took place in the creation of everything. For when the Creator determined to make animals, the first created in his arrangement were in some degree inferior, such as the fishes, and the last were the best, namely, man. And the others, the terrestrial and winged creatures, were between these extremes, being better than the first created, and inferior to the last. So then, after all the other things, as has been said before, Moses said that man was made in the image and likeness of God. And he says, well, for nothing that is born on the earth is more resembling God than man. And let no one think that he is able to judge of this likeness from the characters of the body. For neither is God a being with the form of a man, nor is the human body like the form of God. But the resemblance is spoken of with reference to the most important part of the soul, namely, the mind. For the mind which exists in each individual has been created after the likeness of that one mind which is in the universe as its primitive model, being in some sort the God of that body which carries it about and bears its image within it, in the same rank that the great governor occupies in the universal world. The same, as it seems, does the mind of man occupy in man. For it is invisible, though it sees everything itself, and it has an essence which is undiscernible, though it can discern the essences of all other things. And making for itself by art and science all sorts of roads leading in divers directions, and all plain, it traverses land and sea, investigating everything which is contained in either element. And again, being raised up on wings, and so surveying and contemplating the air, and all the commotions to which it is subject, it is borne upwards to the higher firmament, and to the revolutions of the heavenly bodies. And also being itself involved in the revolutions of the planets and fixed stars according to the perfect laws of music, and being led on by love, which is the guide of wisdom, it proceeds onwards till, having surmounted all essence intelligible by the external senses, it comes to aspire to such as is perceivable only by the intellect. And perceiving in that the original models and ideas of those things intelligible by the external senses which it saw here full of surpassing beauty, it becomes seized with a sort of sober intoxication, like the zealots engaged in the Corybantian festivals, and yields to enthusiasm, becoming filled with another desire, and a more excellent longing, by which it is conducted onwards to the very summit of such things as are perceptible only to the intellect, till it appears to be reaching the great King himself. And while it is eagerly longing to behold him pure and unmingled, rays of divine light are poured forth upon it like a torrent, so as to bewilder the eyes of its intelligence by their splendor. To be continued in the next video.